and so people can do a walk through there, right? And I think some of the other kind of combinations of social, email, and other digital strategies. There's been folks doing wine tastings that say, okay, it's maybe a pretty hefty ticket, but when you buy that ticket, you are going to 2 weeks in advance, you're going to get shipped a box with 3 bottles of wine in it, and we expect you to dress up, bring your corkscrew, sit there at your desk, right, with your guest, and on Facebook Live, we're going to have someone walking through and doing the taste. And it's like you're just trying to find creative ways to kind of build community using the online space instead of the ballroom, right? And just like, when you think about an event specifically, you've got the wine pull, you have the actual bar, you have the auction items, you have things for people to do to enjoy what might be a 2 or 3 hour chunk of time. And you have the keynote and you have the meal served, right? It breaks up that effort or that event so that people's attention is always kind of on you indirectly, right? Moving your event online, right? It can't be 3 hours of a talking head, right? It's kind of like you're going to lose that really quick. People have all sorts of distractions, things buzzing and other screens and kids, and right. So you've got to be really intentional. Most of these online events that I'm seeing that are either live or pre-recorded are like 45, 60 minutes tops. And in there, they're doing the best ones are being really creative with swapping out slides, even little like mini commercials in between speakers. That's like, right? It's a sponsorship, people sponsoring their Zoom backgrounds. Like you can get creative and do some neat things to break up the visual, right? One of the best ones I saw was, I'm sure it cost them some money, but they had the speakers in a place where they could do 2 camera angles. And that one little decision made it so much more engaging to watch the speaker, right? Because just switching the camera angle, I'm sure there's some science behind it, but something happens cerebrally that just makes you kind of still pay attention, right? Through the whole 8-minute keynote instead of spacing out 4 minutes in. Like those little subtle things, especially in an online event whether it's live or recorded, can really, really help. So,
Cool. Great.
So Sumi, you mentioned an email strategy specifically for your event. And Nathan, you gave us permission to maybe email a little bit more often than we usually do.
I agree.
Can you, maybe both of you, speak a little bit more broadly about how organizations can be using email as part of their fundraising strategy right now?
Sure.
Yeah,
I think, for us, we are, my organization specifically does not yet have a really robust kind of donor acquisition, email capture, those kind of traditional, those marketing strategies online, right? What's your lead magnet is a term we've been using a lot more in the last 6 months or 2 months than we have previously, right? Whether it's a white paper or a top 10 list or something that's going to kind of engage people. That's your lead magnet from a marketing funnel, right, standpoint. People brand new to you might see something on Facebook or get forwarded an email and they say, you know what, I'm interested in that. And for the value of whatever that thing is, I'm going to give you my email address, right? That's the transaction. That's the value transaction right there. And then all of a sudden they're in your catchment, right? And that's that email address. You start sending them occasional stuff that's relevant and try to kind of see if they're interested in whatever's next and appropriate for your organization. So I think people, including us, are starting to focus more and more on that because we're not having in-person events. We're not doing other kind of acquisition style strategies. It's really hard to do a direct mail piece right now that's relevant because it takes usually a couple weeks at least from your content development to actually hit the mailbox. And a lot can happen in 2 weeks right now. So something you write today is not going to be relevant the first week of June. Sorry, it's just, right? And so we start leaning on these, the online spaces and, if you're not investing time and thinking through that strategy now, by all means, it's time to get started.
Yeah, I really can only speak to what we've been doing right now, and that is just about showing how we're relevant to everything that's going on. And I know that that's not always possible, right? But although I feel like this is affecting our entire lives, it's all kind of relevant. But because we're looking at a global problem, and we focus on poverty alleviation, and we're talking about people who we're trying to help who make less than $1.90 a day. A pandemic like this is truly just, devastating for people like that. And so our email communications have been, and social media on Facebook have more been about sharing what our entrepreneurs who hire those people are doing to help, how they're supporting their employees, and then how our community can support them. So we've been putting a lot of focus there. The other piece, and we were just talking about this yesterday, is trying to think about how can we serve a role of coming from a place of expertise, like being in front of the game, right? And so I think part of the reason I've had a lot of conversations about our virtual gala is because we were ahead, right?
You were.
Yeah, I mean, and one, just timing was luck, and I know that.
Yeah.
But also, I think being decisive is extremely important, right? And so we were very decisive, and then moved in a very decisive way. And so we've talked about how do we continue to have our voice heard by continuing to be proactive and decisive, right? So one of the things that we did, for example, is our chief impact officer, who's also our co-founder, she wrote a blog post about the strategy, a 3-wave strategy for COVID-19 as we look to the future. So thinking about what do we focus on right now in terms of our strategic plan? What do we focus on in the medium term? And then what are we thinking about in the long term as far as, this is not going to be over even when we're all set free from our homes, right? And so what are the ways in which we as an organization are really thinking about those final recipients of our services? And how do we make sure that we're kind of building foundation or shoring up their foundation and making sure they're in a good position to ramp up when that time comes. So that's just a piece, right? Where we thought this is a good conversation to have and is relevant to everyone in our community right now. So we started sharing that out. We had a webinar about it. We put it on social, we put it on LinkedIn. So and then we started getting feedback from people. That was a really interesting blog post. You guys were so straightforward about how you express that. Thank you for sharing it. We're thinking about that too. So in terms of the communication strategy, that's sort of where we are. So sharing the story and making sure that it's really relevant. And then also trying to position ourselves in a place where we are being proactive versus reactive.
Good. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned the videos that you were sharing as part of your strategy. But kind of before we go there, a lot of the questions that we were getting leading up to this webinar were focusing on how are people going to choose, should we take the event online, or should we wait? I guess there was a lot of curiosity about how that decision can be made. And Sumi, I know part of yours was timing, of course, but I'd love to get both of your thoughts on just how do they decide, in the sector, how are we making decisions like this? What would it influence some of those decisions?
One thing I'll say, and I bet Nathan has lots more to say. Nathan, I'm learning lots from you right now, by the way, and I'm really enjoying that. Just from our perspective, I mean, the 3 questions that we asked that were very straightforward. Can we actually afford to not have an event, right? Can we afford to have it in person? Like, what's the risk that comes with that? And just trying to weigh those pros and cons, I think, was really where we were. And we had to make that decision very quickly, right? But when you have time, I think it's also an opportunity to evaluate your event as a whole and whether it is in fact effective. I had a colleague who was speaking about the Boys and Girls Club here in Washington State, and they actually stepped away from their gala actually a year ago because they decided that in fact the ROI was not there. There was so much staff time and money that went into it, when in fact what they found was peer-to-peer fundraising was really where they were going to see the greatest return. And so they actually shifted away from having a major gala. They have other one-off events but they actually started to really count on their volunteers because they identified that they have a really robust volunteer, program, and found that they were able to raise as much, if not more money that way. And so I do think that it's an opportunity to look at your gala if you have the time to do it and say, was it working anyway? Do we want to shift this into a different space? The virtual or not to go virtual, that is more of a subjective thing, I think. But yeah, I think it's an opportunity to kind of rethink your strategy.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think, for anybody that's taken the specifically the marketing course through the fundraising school, we talk about events specifically for a little while, and I think one of the aha moments for most people in that course, and you'll have to go to the course to get the rest of it, but I'm going to give you one of these, is that we think of events as fundraisers when in fact, like, the dollar amount they raise is not the only value, right? And if it's about just raising the money, then when you do your analysis, your major gift strategy is going to be much more efficient and effective, right? In terms of you sit down for lunch with the right person and buy them some tacos, and you come home with 50 grand, like, you're going to feel like you're doing the quick math, right? It's $15 for the tacos, like 50 grand, like, let's just do that, right? Instead of having events, right? But what we forget is all the other goals that events have, right? And usually do accomplish when we do them well. And that's the energy, that's the momentum, the excitement, the new donor recruitment, right? Like allowing somebody who maybe has been supporting an organization from a distance, and at one of your events, they really fall deeply in love with your mission and what you're doing. And that person then is a future major supporter or a board member, or, right? There's all these other values of an event. So you really got to think through, not only do we need the money, can we raise the money, that sort of thing, but what are the other values of doing this event, and are there other creative ways to still accomplish that purpose, and do so online? Specifically when it comes to that decision of whether to do it online or either not do it or wait and do it, or I think we do have to follow the laws and follow our governors and everyone who is making some of these decisions. So you have to think about that. You also have to think about the additional costs of whether it's sneeze guards that you're at the silent auction, or I don't know what that would look like yet, but right, masks and stuff like that sounds kind of crazy. I would just lean away right now from doing in-person fundraising events. However, if you feel like you have the runway and you think, gosh, my event is in October, well, then I think saying, okay, we're going to touch base on the first of each month, and we're going to reassess. You can't, in my opinion, you just plain can't make a lot of decisions right now. So I think you do want to look at the contracts, look at the cancellation policies, like start to understand where you're going to have cash committed that you can't pull back, those sorts of things. But it's really hard to rush into and be confident in any decisions we're making right now that are impacting anything, 6 weeks out or more. And then I think also thinking about your audience, right? Are they I was on a call the other day with, I won't give much detail, but we reminded people to mute themselves, as I'm sure you all are doing on causes all the time. And when I said that, half the room hang up because they clicked the wrong button. Okay, so this is a group that it's okay, but this, like, right, how comfortable are our audiences with this technology? How likely are they, to log into an event and enjoy it? Do we have the ways to make it enjoyable and creative online? Or do we think, what, this event is so unique and so traditional, and the pillars of the traditions are about being in person, we're going to wait. And we're going to make that calculated risk decision and say, what, we're not going to cancel it. We're going to postpone it and promote it until we can have it in person. That might be the best decision for your organization.
And may I just add one more thing too, just
Please.
some points of data for us. When you're thinking about donor cultivation and the fear of not having an in-person event, half of the people that made donations to Upaya were not coming to the gala. So we would never have gotten those people if we had not had this virtual event. And it was because suddenly we had people in New York and London saying, hey, I can give you money now. And And we actually had some high net worth people in Seattle who never like to come and said, I'm happy to give you money from my couch, right? So half of those people were not coming. The second is 37% of our donors were first-time donors. So, I also think about, don't go down the road of thinking you're not going to get new donors by doing it this way. There's a whole other segment of people that you haven't been able to touch this way. And now we're beginning to think, oh, next year, if we have an in-person gala, please let that be possible. Do we want to have a virtual component that actually taps into that segment of donors?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I think
So cool.
remembering that event attendance is, for some people, depending on where they are in their life and their career and that sort of thing, they can't wait to buy tickets to an event, right? And come home with an auction item and get all dressed up. And to other folks, they've done dozens of those. They don't have the bandwidth, or they're tired of being social, or there's just other things. They're not event people. Or that's the group, to Sumi's great point, like you can maybe engage them in a way you never could before.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I think a lot of our events going forward are going to have an in-person and an online component, because we're going to realize that speaks to two audiences, and we want everybody to participate.
Wow. Yeah, thank you both for really sharing a lot of the things we need to be thinking through. I know we have a couple of friends with us in our audience right now who are thinking about their golf outing in August or their bike ride in October. Lots of things, from the contracts to the audience to, how are people going to feel? Luckily, those are both outdoor activities. I'd feel a little bit better about that than a crowded, ballroom. But who goes to golf outings? People who golf. That's probably a very small part of your larger donor audience. So to your point, these could be opportunities to think differently about our special events, to think more broadly about who our audience is and what they like to do and where they like to go, because they might not want to go to a crowded hotel ballroom anytime in the near future.
Yeah.
So Sumi, you mentioned the peer-to-peer fundraising, and I know, Nathan, you've done a lot of work around crowdfunding as well. So I might just kind of move our conversation to this space, thinking about all the digital tools to do some of that peer-to-peer crowdfunding, thinking ahead to Giving Tuesday in December. Any thoughts or reflections you want to share about using that as another way to raise funds right now?
I'll say a little, because I think Nathan will have more to say. So I'll just relate some of the things that we learned. I actually was talking to a person who runs an event, business, and we were talking about our gala for next year. And she said, I just want to clarify, you guys didn't do a virtual gala, you did a peer-to-peer fundraiser. She said, because you didn't stream anything, like you didn't have a program or any of that sort of stuff. She said, and so really what we did was peer-to-peer fundraising. And it was actually a point I wanted to make sure I brought up, which is that we really engaged our table captains to be fundraisers. And so if you saw our gala webpage, we actually set up fundraising pages for each of our table captains, and then they were able to take those links and go out and raise money. So we saw a lot of money come in that way. And so I do think that, if you're going to ask me where this money came from, like how were we able to raise that kind of money in terms of like who we engaged, it was really the table captains, our board chair. Like we were all making phone calls, right, in the background, calling people and saying, hey, did you see that email came out? And we even had a running list of donors that we typically know give, and we're keeping track of whether they'd made a donation so that we could kind of diplomatically follow up. And so that's kind of the peer-to-peer fundraising piece that we saw in terms of the gala, but also is just a reflection of, I think when you have those champions, if you can help them find a way to have a digital platform for fundraising, then it's a great way to do it. And just on a technical level, I'll tell you that we used Classy. We already had Classy as part of our system, so it was easy to kind of make that conversion, but they were also very cooperative with us. And so we were able to set up fundraising pages for everybody that way. So that's what I'll say for now, and then I'll let Nathan speak.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to to recognize the difference between crowdfunding and peer-to-peer first, right? I mean, crowdfunding is often kind of a singular organization or effort to raise a certain amount of money kind of from everybody at once, right? And those can be kind of the GoFundMe pages, that sort of thing. Whereas peer-to-peer is more like what Sumi described, where you are not only kind of looking to raise a certain amount of money for maybe a project, but you have recruited advocates, right, to raise money. Each of them raise their own money from their own networks, either towards smaller parts of that project or it all rolls up together. And that peer-to-peer, it's one thing to kind of put a big thermometer on your website and start posting on your Facebook page and just hope it works, right? Like the peer-to-peer, right, takes a lot more legwork, right, to recruit folks, to train them, to make sure they're comfortable with what's happening and coach them on emails to send to their audience and that sort of thing. But that legwork really does help because then you have that many people doing the work of raising the funds and making the requests and communicating the vision. And so you've essentially decentralized some of that effort, and you're more, in my opinion, more likely to succeed if you've got all those advocates really working on behalf of that project. So I think in either case, there are now bazillions of technologies out there you can pick from, right? Classy, and there's long lists. And if you Google compare crowdfunding platforms, you'll find more blog posts about comparing all of them. So you can do the homework to choose what really works for you. Of course, you want low fees. Of course, you want it to look modern, work on mobile, all of that sort of thing. Some of the things that I suggest you consider is being able to manually add offline gifts, right? Because if you're running a single 24-hour crowdfunding or peer-to-peer campaign and somebody calls and says, I'm traveling, or I can't make the gift online, or I actually would prefer to send you a check, or I just requested $1,000 from my donor advised fund, you'll get it in 2 weeks. Well, you want that to count on your thermometer today, even though, right? So you need to be able to go in quickly and add that $1,000 and watch the thermometer grow, right? Totally, as opposed to just not enjoy the momentum, right? So some of the features to be able to change the goal, add offline gifts, ideally you're ready for. I think the other big one we talk about is the psychology of the tip jar, right? When you walk into a coffee shop and the tip jar is empty, you're going to think something, right? Maybe the coffee's not that good, and I'm probably not going to tip anyway, right? Because nobody else does, right? But it's actually it's a proven psychological concept. It's called social proof, right? The idea that somebody went first, right? If you've ever worked at a place that takes tips, you know that the first thing you do when you start your shift is to drop some money in the jar. Cathy's nodding, right? Like, because that makes it, right, more palatable. People are more used to it, and it's the same coffee, but all of a sudden it tastes better, and you're more willing to, right, to tip. The same is true in our campaigns, all the way up to giant capital campaigns. That's why we do lead gifts and quiet phases and things like that. The same is true on your digital campaigns and your thermometers, whether it's peer-to-peer or crowdfunding. If you launch a $25,000 campaign online, you're going to try to do it in a week, and you send the email out Monday morning to 1,000 people. Half of them click on a link and go to the site, and it's an empty thermometer. Right? What's the psychology? It's kind of, right? Is that like, right? What are they thinking? They're thinking no one else did. My $20 isn't going to help anyway, and you lost them, right? If you send that out Monday morning, and you've seeded it with a few donors in advance, and it's at 10 or 12 or 1,000 or something, if it's kind of close to halfway or even beyond, the psychology just changes, right? No one wants to be the first gift. Everybody wants to be the last gift. They want to be the one that got you over the finish line, right? And so the more you can make sure everybody sees the thermometer when it's almost there, the better the results are going to be, the higher the energy is, right? And so we did a campaign on Giving Tuesday now and set out a $15,000 goal. We were kind of strategically quiet about parts of it and made it look right organically like it's taking off, and it did raise over 30 grand, right? Because we could change the goal, and because along the day, and we could see who was logging in and seeing what, and so that it always looked like an almost full tip jar the best we could, right?
Yep.
Does that make sense? And back to Sumi's earlier point, it was also relevant. We're a school, we did the money for food and technology, the things that our families needed now. Yes, admittedly, that was unbudgeted stuff. So that was just donations in and directly out. We still are going to be working on our annual support and scholarships and other stuff, but that was the thing that was needed now, relevant now, that our donors wanted to help with now. It made sense to position it around that.
Yeah, and I just want to reinforce that, Cathy, when you were asking me about the communication plan, I think part of that story was also us saying, okay, we know we have a few significant gifts. Where do we want to plug them in? So that it looks to maintain momentum, to look like we're going up. And so when we saw that slow down on Wednesday, Thursday, it was like, okay, now this is when we put this piece in, right? Like, so we really did very intentionally plan on those pieces. And then we saved our challenge match for the last day for that very reason. Yeah. And I think it varies depending on your audience, but we saw an amazing response on that Friday when we put that challenge match out. And in particular this is kind of interesting. This is the first time I'm sort of thinking about this, but on that day, I feel like we saw a lot of corporate matches kind of come through as well, where I had friends call me and say, hey, I want to make a $250 donation and I work for Google, so they're going to match it. And now you've got this challenge match, so you're going to get that other match. And they were so excited and motivated to make the donation on that day. So that was kind of an interesting little added piece that I noticed as well, those people that are able to multiply their gift.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I can see either whether you're just planning a day-long activity or even a few hours, or whether if it's going to be a multiple days, the purpose of really thinking about and planning out how to keep that momentum, how to keep that energy going, how to blend the unique with some of the expected. And I thought, Sumi, particularly in your event on the website, the way that you employed video was really strategic. And so I'd like to kind of move into the video audio components of these processes. And I'd love, you highlighted just a little bit of it earlier, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. First of all, I've had a lot of people ask me who did our camera work. It was an Android phone on a tripod, so in our office. So totally informal, but I think that works as well when, especially in the terms of the tone that we were setting for this 4-day campaign, where we were very sincere in saying, like, this is crazy. We need to raise this money. We're counting on all of you and we appreciate you. Right. And we were just kind of doing these videos. But yeah, so let's see, we talked about kind of using the videos for the keynote speaker, the board chair, the CEO. Our co-founder also did the ask video on Friday morning, which was really wonderful. She did an amazing job. And then the other thing we did was, because we had 5 live auction items, we actually asked our auctioneer to come in, and he put on a tux, and he and our CEO introduced each live auction item on a video. So they talked about the item, who was doing it, what it was worth, all the stuff. But because he, as auctioneers often are, was just such a charismatic, like super funny guy, these videos were just really funny and fun to watch. And so we actually posted those videos along with the descriptions of the live auction items. And just a technical piece that I want to share. So we used Greater Giving for the live auction platform. Is that right? Yes. But what we found was we were able to actually embed the videos into our virtual gala website, so that if you just scroll down, you had the live auction descriptions, and then you had the video embedded, and you could click on that and it would take you there. But that way it was kind of one-stop shop for everybody. And it also just presented better. It looked better that way. But so that was probably one of the more fun and more creative things that we did with video.
Yeah, and I peeked at one of those videos too. I thought, wow, did they get actors? How did they do this? And so having people that are dynamic on video, I know is one of the key pieces, certainly, and
yes, absolutely,
that comes across. So if you're looking for a way to do this, check out the website. We'll give you guys a chance to share both of yours. And Nathan, how about you? As far as just the whole video engagement, I know you do a lot of that as well in your own at school. And
yeah, I think what I'm seeing more and more is there's an abundance of tools to help you make the most of your iPhone or Android phone, right? Like through whether it's animation or kind of sketch, right? Like and you see these advertised kind of on social media and those sorts of things, but they're often relatively accessible, right? Kind of a low cost bar. And it makes, if it's somebody doodling your logo, right? It's just different, right? In a 7-second sketch, they're doodling your logo like fast sketch, right? And maybe it costs you $50 or something, but that's the beginning now of this series of videos, and it's different and it's new and it makes you look modern and relevant, right? And so you start piecing some of those things together, the dynamic typography, like the moving, I don't know if you remember the old Ford truck commercials that were we were the first ones to use that, right? Where the guy is reading and the words he's reading are actually coming on the screen and moving around, and like it's just scientifically, like it's proven that people engage more and are watching and internalize and comprehend the message when you're using that, right? So now, a couple years later from that Ford commercial, you see a lot of commercials where there's words on the screen as someone is speaking, because it's kind of in your eyes and your ears, and you're just hearing it and internalizing it better. And there are more and more tools, it seems like every day, apps to download and do that with, right? There's also better tools now for presentation, right? For recording a video, and it looks like you're the weather person because you can superimpose these graphics and stuff, right? Whether it's Prezi video or Teachable now has some and that sort of thing. And it just with the lower third, right? Like you can have your name and your title and what temperature it is outside or whatever, like the news, right? Like that is stuff that used to be reserved for like high production value places, and now we can make those kinds of videos using our phones, right? And yes, it's new technology. You have to pick a couple, you have to test them. Usually they all will give you free 2-week trials. So playing with that though, like you can now, not only are the cameras of course much better on your phone, but all of these tools that make video look highly produced, right? And then Sumi just shared her secret. It was just on a phone. So it's absolutely possible, and it's fun to play with. So.
I feel like the tripod was the most important thing. That's my advice.
That's great. Absolutely.
Get a tripod.
So you're not like,
yeah. Yep.
Nobody wants to be car sick at your gala.
Even on our team, we're finding as all of our workflows have changed over the last 2 or 3 months. One of our team members has more time to learn more about video editing and all of the tools available to us. I mean, we were using Zoom before, but now we use it for everything. And now we have like a Zoom master on our team. And, those are, again, some of the opportunities that are available to us to, if we have that time and space to learn some of these tools that aren't necessarily very difficult to do. We just never had time before. Maybe we do now. Yeah. Absolutely. So we've been talking a lot about engaging our individual donors. Sumi, you mentioned sponsors to your gala, and maybe we could spend a few minutes as we have about 10-ish minutes left together. A few minutes talking about sponsors, engaging corporate donors, using our digital tools to care for those sponsors and corporate donors.
Yeah. And, I confess that our system was probably pretty basic and straightforward. Again, literally every day we were deciding something, right? So it was a very short period of time to work with. But as soon as we knew that the gala was not going to happen in person, the first thing we did was called our sponsors. It's Yeah. You don't want them to hear it any other way besides from you. The second thing is we really assumed that they were going to stick with us. And so the conversation was not, hey, is this okay? It was, this is what's happening. And here is how we are proceeding. Here is how we're going to make sure you have visibility. Or your brand is given visibility through this process. That was really more the way that I chose to have those conversations. And none of our sponsors backed out. They were all very supportive. And yeah, basically you just look at all of the outreach that you're doing and how can you inject some statement, some kind of visual about the sponsors, right? And so there was one day where we said, we want to call out our $5,000 level sponsors, and we just listed them out. Or I went to one sponsor and said, would you be willing to be a significant gift on this day that I can mention? So, we made sure there were logos on the website. We made sure that we were acknowledging sponsors in the emails, but then we did these little things of just like calling pockets of them to make sure that they had like a specific line in the bulleted email that went out, right? So those are some of the things we did. I think using social media, Facebook is another great way to do that while you're still doing your email communications, is to share what such and such organization is doing to support Upaya and thank them really explicitly. We did have one sponsor with whom, the engagement was a little more complicated. It wasn't just about the event, but it was also like working with the keynote speaker who was coming to visit. And so, we really wanted to make sure that they felt like they got value out of that relationship. And so that became more of a, let's talk about how we can make sure that you're still able to work with the keynote speaker. We're still able to call you out over the next 3 to 4 months. So it wasn't just about the gala itself, but like we can extend this and make sure that you're getting kind of what you were hoping for out of the sponsorship. So thinking about, you don't have to think about it in that finite amount of time. You can think about how you can expand that and make sure that they're getting value from it. And then also that you're continuing to cultivate and steward for that next gala or for your future conversations, right?
Very cool.
Anything you want to add, Nathan, about corporate donors?
I think one of Sumi's last comments, like making sure you understand what they wanted out of the sponsorship, right? If you've done corporate kind of sponsorships enough, you know that there's a spectrum. Like there are some sponsorships that come as a favor to an exec or somebody that they never did have any expectations about visibility. So you don't want to be racking your brain and stressed about how to pull that off, right?
Yeah.
You want to know what their expectations were, right? And then there's others that they have a finite amount of marketing dollars. They told you this is about eyeballs. Yes, they love your cause, but they do sponsor from a marketing perspective and need visibility. So that's the group to make sure that you're prioritizing that with, right? A couple of the things I've seen that I love so much are the creative ways to get visibility to those folks, right? And that is, if you can in advance of the event, call your sponsor, hey, here's my home address. I need you to ship me anything cool with a logo on it, right? It's because you're going to be in front of the screen holding up cups or mugs or whatever it is. Or look, here's real estate on my wall. I will sell you that space, right? Zoom backgrounds, lapel pins, switching the pin out every 15 minutes and highlighting it. Like, right? There are creative things you can do. Dress in the company colors, right? And come back on screen then later in a different tie with a different company color and calling that out. Like some of that stuff, all of it sounds pretty goofy, and maybe in a normal situation you wouldn't do that in person. But again, this is now a medium where everybody's got permission to be creative, to be a little sillier, right? And they will appreciate the effort you're going to make sure they get the value out of the marketing sponsorship that you originally discussed.
Great.
Wonderful.
Good questions.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, good. Well, as kind of as we wrap our time together, I'm gonna bring up the elephant in the room. When I was a little kid, my mom used to say, if you stare at the screen too long, your eyes are going to be square. And we are spending an awful lot of time on a screen these days. I'm sure you guys are facing the same that we are. And all of our colleagues as well. So what sort of takeaways, advice, thoughts do you have as we think about this whole digital fundraising in this digital space and combating this whole idea of screen fatigue?
Yeah, on our end, we're encouraging our team to take a walk, to do, if there's a conversation that can happen on the phone instead of a screen, please do it, right? If you have the ability to actually close the laptop when you're thinking through a project, and also realizing whether screen fatigue is an issue for the people you're talking to, right? I mean, there are moments where we've been on Zoom calls all day straight, right? One after another, right? But there are other people who we might be their only Zoom call or their first Zoom call, and they're really excited about the technology, right? And so kind of understanding if it's a supporter who's leading a business and is on video nonstop, if you can be the one that offers the break, hey, I'm going to take a walk. Can I put my headphones in and call you? They may absolutely, please do, and I'll do the same. And right, so understanding your audience can be really, really helpful, and just finding creative ways to connect. I know some folks have, if you're comfortable, or meeting at a park and having a conversation with a donor in a lawn chair 6 feet away, again, sounds completely nuts, right? Like, we would not have, if you would ask somebody to do that back in October, you might not have received a donation, right? Let alone the meeting, right? But that idea of, can we step away, find creative ways to still have those important conversations?
Yeah, I definitely think sort of the asking permission, especially with donors, like, would you be comfortable getting on camera right now? Or would you prefer not to, is something that we've definitely done. And then also when we're having more initial conversations where maybe we're sharing, kind of the high level intro of who Upaya is, we might say, would you be okay if I keep a slide up so it's something for you to look at and kind of refer to? And it sort of can be used as a good excuse to not be on camera. Because it's at least something to look at, versus just like the random Zoom screen.
Yeah.
So that's actually been something that's sort of helpful. You're not going through a presentation, but it's up, right? And it could be a really nice photo, or it could be just a brief description of your organization, something that's just kind of nice to look at, I think is good. And then I also think, kind of to Nathan's point of being sensitive to the people we're talking to, both staff and our community, right? Is we're really making an effort to make sure to ask how people are. And I think this is the time and an opportunity where we can also be a little more goofy and funny. We can also be a little more personal, right? You're literally in my home right now. So we're in each other's homes. And so we really do always start our conversations with just saying, like, how are you? How is life going for you? What does work look like for you? What does parenting look like for you? And I think that those conversations, when you start that way, they really set a tone that's just much kinder, And so I really think that those are some of the ways that are a good way to use it. And just on a team level, I just want to share that we as a team in Seattle decided we would talk to each other every day at 10 a.m. about not work, like just for 30 minutes. And so we get on and we could be in our pajamas. It does not matter. We just all check in with each other and just ask each other how we're doing and what it looks like there. And we talk about the weather, but it's just like, it's kind of normalizing things a little bit, right? And not spending a lot of time talking about how hard things are, or if we have to, that's what we do too. But I just think bringing a little bit of that personal element, both into the work side of like our staff side of it, as well as our donor side, this is the time when we can actually do that. And I think people appreciate being asked.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's so great. Yeah, this is a time for us to always remember to share that empathy with each other and with our donors, our supporters, and our colleagues and our family members who are working right alongside us, and our kiddos who are learning right alongside us. So thank you both so much for sharing your time with us today and for being great friends of the Fundraising School. It is time to say goodbye, but we'll see you at your desk in about another month from now. We hope you'll join us again for this conversation from the Fundraising School. Until then, maybe we'll see you on our weekly podcast. You'll hear us in your ears. You might join us for one of those virtual courses or online courses. Please let us know how we can serve you here at the Fundraising School. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Nathan, Sumi, and Cathy.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.